It is actually reported that there is sexual immorality among you, and of a kind that does not occur even among pagans. A man has his father's wife. 1 Corinthians 5 in verse 1. Adding adultery in marriage. Look at this text. Dangerous effects of illegal sex in marriage. Why does this fall under the category of adultery? Is because it involves somebody's wife. Because this young man was sleeping with the wife of his father, maybe not his mother, because if she was his mother, the Bible could have said, but the Bible says the wife of his father, meaning probably might have been a stepmother. And that is a danger of men marrying young women after the first wife is normal, maybe through death or divorce. So you go and you find yourself, you're marrying a girl that is the age of one of your children. It creates that space. Or a woman there, you are getting married to a very young man who is like the age of your own daughter. Most likely, if there is no ethical authority there, you will be sharing that young man with your daughter, because they'll be saying at the end of the day there is no blood relation. But as long as there is an intercourse of this wife, so this woman described here by Paul was sleeping with the father, and then would go and sleep with the son. And if you look at it, if you read it from a different angle, it may mean this was a young man or a man in the church, because actually it's a young man sleeping with the pastor's wife, if you can take it from another dimension. And this today is happening very much. You find the young men are the one who are chewing the wives of men of God. And now this is a dangerous thing about that. Paul put it this way. Number one is spiritual father's judgment. Even if your spiritual father will not know it. Paul says in number one of the dangerous effects of adultery. He states it in verse 2. And you are proud, shouldn't you rather have been filled with grief and put him out of your fellowship? The man who did this, even though I am not physically present, I am with you in spirit, and have already passed judgment on the one who did this, just as if I were present. So key number one, if you commit adultery, you receive spiritual father's judgment. That's why you realize you can go and do your sin secretly, but when you come to church on Sunday, you hear pastor preaching and addressing you directly as if he knows everything, and he doesn't know. But the spirit adultery attracts direct condemnation by the spiritual authority that is in your life at that moment. Number two, adultery brings fellowship grief. He says that in verse 2, shouldn't you rather have been filled with grief? If you consider the 2 Corinthians chapter number 2 and verse 5, if anyone has caused grief, he has not so much grieved me as he has grieved all of you to some extent, not to put it too severely. So number 2, adultery brings communal or fellowship grief. Let's notice, a man can go and commit adultery, and it will bring grief to the whole of your family, your wife and children. A wife can go and commit adultery, and it will bring grief to the whole family system. Why? Because adultery brings fellowship grief. You may commit adultery, but you will pour a crown upon the many, a crowd of grief. Number 3 is you are handed over to Satan. Still 1 Corinthians 5 and verse 5. If you look at it there, says Paul says, hand this man over to Satan, so that the sinful nature might be destroyed. How do the sinful nature be destroyed by Satan? Through diseases. So whenever you commit adultery hands you over immediately in the hands of Satan himself. Go and commit adultery. It is very sweet. Eating the woman of another man, or being eaten by the husband of another woman, you do it. But by the time that action is ending, you get out of that action when you are in the hands of Satan. Satan becomes your master, and he has one assignment: to destroy your flesh. So you can imagine Satan, who is now destroying your sinful nature. How? With diseases, HIV, cancer, everything that destroys the flesh. Prostate cancer, cervical cancer, because that's what we call the flesh. So, adultery hands you over to Satan for sinful nature destruction. Something else is you make the whole community to be inflicted with the punishment. The same man, 2 Corinthians 2 and verse 11 says what? In order that the Satan might not outwit us, for we are not aware of his schemes. So when you commit adultery, you enter into schemes of Satan. Satan is now able to outwit you. You cannot outwit Satan. Now he outwits you. If you look at the same 2 Corinthians 2 verse 6, says, the punishment inflicted on him by the majority is sufficient for him. So when you commit adultery, you attract community punishment. This is when you can find yourself suffering from or being inflicted with a community punishment. If you remember in the olden days, if you were caught indulging with somebody's wife, you were called in the community baraza, and you were whipped with that whip when you were naked, and then they would put you in a beehive, and they will allow it to lower down the cliff, and then they would bring wood that will produce a lot of smoke, and they will put you in that smoke system. The community is punishing you for eloping with somebody else's wife. So if you commit adultery, you will notice the punishment of the community. If there is a curse hovering in the air about a certain community or society, if you commit adultery, that punishment or curse now functions in you. So there are people who are carrying society curses. You just get it through committing adultery. And then it speaks of overwhelmed by excessive sorrow. The same thing he says, or he might be overwhelmed by excessive sorrow. That is 2 Corinthians 2 and verse 7 says, now instead you ought to forgive and comfort him, so that he will not be overwhelmed by excessive sorrow. So adultery brings overwhelming excessive sorrow. Hey, it's dangerous. So you will try to overcome your distress, your depression, hardships in life, difficulties in life. Instead, you get subdued. You get overwhelmed. Adultery is dangerous. You notice things that would bring sorrow to you come in excessive manner. So many problems that overwhelm you. That is what adultery does to the adult.